Lisa, always wonderful to sit with you. You and I get to see each other and cross paths so often at these events.
Likewise, and I very much enjoy the opportunity to get together. And I follow you on LinkedIn, and you are one of my fonts of information, the go-to person that I look to see because you're hearing it straight out of the horse's mouth all the time.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
so are you. You know, it's interesting you bring that up because we were chatting. You and I are usually like the windows to the industry on what's coming, right? Verinex and yourself in particular, you've been so plugged into and so instrumental in the growth of this industry. And people lean on you for insights, advice, guidance. And so I was excited to sit down with you because you get to see what I see, and I sort of will whisper over to you. Have you seen this? So
Yeah.
what can you share? What are you keeping your eyes on? What are you experiencing? Where do you see it from your perspective, things going?
Yeah, I know. So in my role, so Verinex, as you know, is like a Medtech only innovation solutions provider. And by that meaning we can help people with their portfolio with big problems and bring together curated teams to address those issues, right? So in my role as leading strategic partnerships, I sit with folks that have portfolios and are decision makers for a portfolio or a business unit. And I love to ask them, so what's keeping you awake at night? You know, what are the problems you are having? And, you know, how can we be of help? And that's sort of like in my DNA anyway. I think it's in yours too. But, and so I get to hear like where they're having problems. So of course, everybody seems to be struggling with like EU MDR and whether it's the large strategics or the startups on the funding side. But more often than not, my focus is around innovation and their innovation needs. So I'd say I'm seeing a lot more now in white space, new product innovation. They're coming to us for that expertise in bringing a curated team. And also in collaborative innovation, where you might be in a build-to-buy situation, multiple parties involved, and they need a service, a person, an engine that can deliver on that innovation. They're coming to Verinex.
Yeah, and I'm starting to see that too. We chatted about it in one of the panels last night when you take a complex surgical robotic system as an example, and you have telepresence you have to deal with, right? You have digital, you have AI. You've got issues with either ergonomics, UI, UX. And so there are organizations that do that extraordinarily well. And having that open API-ish type environment where you can come in, come out, and you certainly with Verinex and yourself know who does some of those tasks really well.
Yeah.
And you usually will facilitate that together, right?
Yeah. I'd say our a core competency is complex systems, especially right now. I'm very excited about complex systems that can not only image, guide, and deliver therapy and accumulate and generate incredible data and AI algorithms for improvement. So, and that's where I think we can help deliver because we have the full R&D resources in-house and along with strategy and reimbursement and trying to figure out how they're going to get paid on these new innovations and so forth. So that area, I'd say because it is complex, it's a big, everyone's dealing with that, and we're getting in front of that on a daily basis.
Yeah, and I want to come back to that because I had a good conversation with a good friend of mine, Scott Hunnekens. We were talking about this recently, and this new category of what he referred to as precision-guided therapies.
Yeah.
Right, so as an example, you're on one side of the equation, you've got the big iron imaging companies on the pre-op imaging and the sort of the diagnostic imaging. On the other side of the continuum, you have the therapeutics and then the intraoperative imaging, whether it's the Strykers or the Storts or Olympus, whoever it is. But now right in the middle are these companies that are not making equipment, not making devices, but are making a molecule that can light up the area of the therapy that you want to. I'm thinking about OnTarget and Cytolux is the shining example of that. Is you can go ahead and you get your pre-op imaging. You can then get the molecule attached to the cancer cell, and then intraoperatively, the surgeon's in there, and they light it up, and you can excise that diseased tissue like so precisely,
Yeah.
and then come on out. And I think that's an unlock for a lot of categories. So that area you're
Yeah.
also seeing growing quite a bit?
Oh, definitely. And that area, and in addition to that, the move into different different areas of care or delivery of care, ambulatory service centers. So those being able to deliver on some of these, but in an ambulatory care center, and move in shifting it there. But in terms of the delivery, yes, the delivery of a therapy, that is bringing in all kinds of complexity, and we're seeing even more opportunity in the CRO. We're a full-service medtech CRO, and now the trials are getting bigger and longer because a lot in medtech we're now delivering therapy.
And Darren Sherman talked about that last night, which was really interesting, is the trials are getting bigger and longer, and they're getting more complex because companies are not only just trying to get clearance or approval, they're now trying to get enough data on the post-market side, so post-clearance, to be able to roll that in while you're in there doing the clinical. And then we've got some of these centers that just are understaffed, that you can't get enough people recruited for that trial. And I think that companies are tending to go in and overestimate how successful they're going to be with recruiting. And that is really extending out and exposing things from an economic perspective.
Yeah, and I see strategies too of, tranching trials, getting a taste on a first tranche so that you can start to hedge your bets and better predict how long the trial is actually going to take.
Are you seeing AI come into this? So there's a couple companies I'm watching very closely that are they're assigning an AI back-end platform in a CRO environment, and based upon the data sets, they are able to predict where the trial, either on the recruitment side or enablement of the protocol, are going to have a problem, get ahead of that problem before the problem rears its head, and then therefore keep the timeline in play and sort of deploy assets where needed before it runs off the rails. And so we're starting to see AI come into the CRO world that I think is critically important for the industry.
Yeah, definitely. No, and we've acquired companies in Europe and of course here in the United States, and we're expanding our footprint and in the whole CRO space, because more often than not, all these trials are also global and need to be delivered globally. So,
Veranex has had this incredible rate of growth.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Hold on, right?
Yeah.
Hold on. I think, and I love the fact that it's medtech centric. It's been a long time coming, because many of the consulting firms will play in life sciences, will play in pharma, biopharma, and so it's almost like the JP Morgan conference, right? You go to JP Morgan as a device player, but you sort of feel like you're just a small percentile of, but Veranex really focused straight down the middle on medtech. And you've got to be kind of busy, because the big strategics now are stepping into areas that they don't have core competencies in on their acquisitions or their partnerships. And that's where Veranex can kind of pull in that subject matter expertise and team to help them as a Sherpa through that. Is that right?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, what we try to do is when we're hiring now, and we've been hiring, but because what we're looking for are people that have experience with working with our large strategic clients, working with startups, but squarely in medtech, and that's all across the whole continuum of innovation, from product development, regulatory, CRO, preclinical, clinical trial data, analytics, management, strategy, market access, reimbursement. So all the way through actually contract manufacturing, clinical build. So delivering, the finished product. So, and I think by having that focus, we're not the entire company. We can bring curated resources, and we're not a small fish in a bigger organization. We are the organization, so we are, yeah. So it's been, I think, very empowering, and it also allows us to get in front of more folks that, like especially the strategic partners. I think they're now realizing the value, and they're coming. At first, the conversations were, well, how are people working with you? You know, and now it's becoming more apparent, and I think they're seeing where we can be a right hand to some of their bigger problems.
You and I were chatting earlier about where's the industry going in 2024.
Yeah.
And you and I will typically go, well, I either watch this, I attend this,
Yeah.
and then I double check this. So what are your wins that you sort of pay attention to?
Yeah, well, I think they're the same as yours. But yeah, you're at JP Morgan, you're in the rain, but you're running around in a fury, and there's all this, I think, excitement of what the year's going to bring. But yet, you know that when JP Morgan's done, you're like, okay, what is it really going to look like? Because everyone's out of the gate. I think there's a bit of, a lot of exciting news and so forth. But I think it's really then after I've gone to LSI, Scott Pentel's conference, the Emerging Medtech Summit in Dana Point. I think it's March 18th to the 21st. We'll both be there. We'll both be on panels and so forth. But, it's I think a phenomenal barometer of the status of the industry, because like this year he has 300 startups coming. It's a tough funding environment, and he has, I think, as many investors there. So it's highly concentrated. It's one week, and all the strategics are there too. So at the end of that week, I'm usually in a really good place to sort of forecast how I think it's going to go, and that's from direct word of mouth from people that you're sitting down meeting with 24/7 at LSI. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree, and I think you characterize J.P. Morgan extraordinarily well, because everybody's, okay, the year's over, especially 2023.
Yeah.
Okay, the year's over, let's go. And we go, and despite the terrible weather, it seems that they just save every year for J.P. Morgan. You come out of there, and again, you're dumped into the vibe of the biotech, biopharma too.
Yeah.
But we find ourselves in the device world in there. And then what I'll typically do is LSI, I'm with you. But I also, at the same time, during that period, I track public markets. Because the public markets and the sort of machinations that are occurring, Medtronic, what are they doing? What's J&J doing?
Yeah.
Medtronic just divested themselves of a franchise. J&J is looking for an acquisition here. So I'll track that in the background, and then I'll track JP, and I'll track LSI. And you really have a reasonably good sampling of what is likely going to come down range the next 6 to 9 months, but election year, so that sort of puts things on hold a little bit. But the surgical robotics world, I think, has been more active than ever right now. I think in 24 and 25, no less than 4 formats are going to make it through the FDA, I think, on the soft tissue side.
Yeah.
I really am excited about that. And that becomes an unlock for the market, in my opinion. So those are the things. I'm with you. That's how I watch that and put my finger up and go, where's it going?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing too is, which I think is good, is we sponsor Medtech Innovator, Paul Grand's accelerator, and serve as judges. And he had over 1,000 applications this year. So I've got to go after this and review 20 startups and evaluate them and select the ones that we think should move forward. And that's a great barometer too, because I'm usually picking key areas like cardiovascular or imaging, digital connected wearables, things that or completely disruptive, obviously, technologies. And that gives me a good read on where new innovation's coming.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you and I have been part of now, thanks to you, Mayo is now
Yeah.
putting on a phenomenal event.
Yeah.
So tell me about the genesis of that one.
That's really interesting because a good friend of mine is Mark Wade, who chairs engineering at Mayo, and I have a blog, which is now a podcast that I'm launching this month called Medtech Pioneers, and
Make a note
we'll
of
have to talk about that. Yeah, but I was featuring Mark in this blog, Medtech Pioneers, and he said, "Oh, there's a powerhouse vice chair of innovation. You have to meet Dr. Janani Reisenauer." And so we met, we hit it off like a house of fire. I asked her to come speak on a panel that we were hosting at AvaMed back in 2021. And she did an amazing job. When we started to talk, she said, "Gosh, it'd be great to bring the industry to the Mayo Clinic to forge more and earlier innovation as a collaborative partner, Mayo and strategics and startups." And I said, "Well, let's pull in a steering committee and work with the Mayo leadership, Dr. Kendricks, Dr. Reisenauer, Andy Danielson, Nir Goldenberg, to design that and build an event." And so that's it. The first one was in September of 2022, and it was very well received. And again in November 2023, you were there, and we had Fred Mull keynote. It was just incredibly. I think it's brought about a lot of collaboration for the Mayo. Now we're planning one for November 7th, and we'll both be there, both serving on the steering committee. It's been a pleasure to chair that steering committee and be a part of that event.
And such a legacy institution, what I really liked about it is the adherence. I know in the steering committee we're really careful. The adherence to making sure we're keeping this as close to science as possible.
Yeah.
Right? So it's SDTS keeps it close clinically, but just in a different style. And Mayo has that legacy to it, and you feel it when you come into Rochester. You feel it when you sit in that environment, and there's a noble sort of, again, adherence to the science and the tech as well. So I really appreciate that one, and I love, again, the industry needs these slightly different nuances to each of the shows.
Yeah, I think that event, what is particularly special about it is it's small, but you have all of the KOLs in surgery appearing on one day to meet in a partnering environment. And so to get that access with all of these thought leaders from the Mayo, and then to have the industry come into Rochester, the FDA, the major strategics, VCs, startups that the Mayo's cherry-picked to have be there, that they're on their radar, I think makes it for a very efficient and exciting one-day summit.
Yeah. So where are you heading from here as we wrap up? Where are you heading what's the plane ticket say next?
Home. Where are you going?
I am off to Israel in about 3 hours with about 10 other business people from the medtech industry to shine a light on the past, present, and future, and why Israel requires, deserves, and should have support around its medtech ecosystem. So I'm excited about that. So
I think there's a panel on that at LSI too.
there's
right?
a panel on that.
Yeah.
So Scott has really set aside one session. I think it's on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. I probably got it wrong. Nick will tell me. And that's being driven by Orchestra Biomed, Deerfield, and the Mullings Group, and certainly supported by LSI. And we're going to have a bunch of members on the panel. Tal Wondero is going to be moderating, who's fantastic. And that is going to be, if you haven't been to Israel and you're in medtech, you're missing part of the story of the building block.
Yeah.
And so it deserves at this point in time, for the terrible conflict going on right now in the Middle East. But that ecosystem needs to have support kept there front and center. Yeah. Regardless of what your beliefs are.
No,
Just
agreed.
at the end of the day, it's a business decision. Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate your time. I know you're crazy busy.
Thank you for having me.
And I always appreciate our time together.
Likewise.
Thanks. I'm Joe Mullings from SDTS, the next big thing in Houston. Be well.